controlled by something greater. Memes. The DNA of the soul.
I think this was one of two possible thought processes that was in the people who successfully funded this game, let alone the people who let this game exist. I think one question that might be racing through your head might be, Jack, what are you doing? Did you hear this game isn't very good? Well, yes, but let me explain why this is happening. You know how the Game Awards tend to worship Rockstar Games as their gods? Well, that worshipping was playing its usual shtick in 2018, even in places where it really shouldn't have. And then I decided that if they did not give the Game of the Year award to Red Dead Redemption 2, then I'd play and review Shaq Fu: A Legend Reborn. And since Red Dead 2 didn't win, which by the way I am totally cool with God of War 2018 taking that award, you can put the pieces together from there. For those uneducated on how this game came to be, there was this one game from 1994 called Shaq Fu, which became notorious for being one of the worst games of all time among internet culture. Maybe not on the same level as something like Bubsy, as I never saw that many YouTubers trash it, but it's still widely disliked. However, I'm assuming that, like Bubsy, Shaq Fu slowly wormed its way into meme territory, where people loved it purely as a joke so they could make fun of it. I mean, I think that's what happened. Either that or Shaq's overall popularity remained strong throughout the years, and some people just wanted to use his fame to make a quick buck? I don't know, but regardless, Shaq Fu: Legend Reborn entered development, and it was advertised that it would be a lot better than the original, since, yeah, they disowned it. But even after a successful campaign on Indiegogo, and a tease back in 2014, the game just vanished. We got no signs on how it was doing until early 2018, where we got a trailer or two before being released in June of last year. One day after my 21st birthday, in fact. Oh, it was like it was meant to be. So here I am, one playthrough later, and I'm reviewing the game. So let's see if they didn't foo it up this time. I know this seems like an arbitrary topic to talk about since this is a beat-em-up, but I've got a big reason for wanting to talk about the story. It's centered on Shaquille O'Neal, as he's basically some chosen one according to a prophecy, where he'll slay some jerkish demon called Yenlo Wang. Basically, it's an excuse to tell a bunch of jokes and let Shaq stuff his foot in the mouth of a lot of demons, a lot of which parody celebrities. By itself, this isn't inherently a bad thing, and with solid writing, it could be funny and a good companion to the gameplay. Guess what the writers didn't give it? Yeah, they didn't give it a good script at all. With the abysmal writing that was put into the story, the sequences where they try to advance the story and make it fun are painful to get through. It tries to make you laugh hard, but instead of actually trying to think of clever humor that could utilize what you do with this concept, instead resorts to tropes of bad parody films by just going for pop culture references and really immaturely written humor with no idea what can make those work. And when it's not being painfully unfunny, the tone can actually take dramatic shifts. I mean, after a few unfunny jokes at the start, Shaq's master eventually dies by getting blasted by one of the first bosses, and this is treated as such a dramatic moment, but it doesn't work because we aren't given any time to connect with this version of Shaq or his master. The game does so little to make us care about their connection that this scene felt like it was just there because what old meant your character doesn't die. And then they go back to the unfunny jokes and have every boss cutscene do the bare minimum dialogue exchange, except for the one with Candy in Stage 4, which is positively repulsive and actually made me say out loud, I can't believe someone actually wrote this and expected it to work. And then after that they suddenly go back to the drama, except it doesn't work there either because the characters are not defined well enough, and thus we don't have a reason to care, making the endgame plot twist between Shaq and the main villain completely unimpactful. The story has no focus. It really can't make up its mind on what it wants to be, and thus fails at everything it's trying to do. I can't tell what kind of jokes they were aiming for in the end, or if the plot being this cluttered is the joke. And if it's the latter, then the writers treated it less like the joke it was meant to be, and more like they were fishing for ideas out of the trash without actually trying. Yes, I said writers, as in two people wrote this, and for what should have been so easy to make funny, they just blew their entire load, and the result is a wreck of scripting. Oh, things are not going to get better from here. To the game's credit, the environments actually look pretty okay. It's not breathtaking, but I would at least accept these kinds of environments for a smaller game. And the music isn't that good, but again, it could be worse. It's comprised of a lot of famous modern songs, and they don't really make my ears bleed, but at the same time though, they really don't have a lasting impact, with the exception of the main theme, but that's only because they play it every time you scroll through menus. Okay, that's enough of the not so bad aspects, now for the bad stuff. Firstly, the environments in the game may look fine, but the in-game character models look awful. Everyone's body proportions are way off, and these aren't used for anything clever. They look very budgeted. I mean, the models of the standard Gooms skipped leg day so much that they put Boom Knuckles to shame. The ninjas look straight out of The Legend of Zelda The Wind Waker and clash horribly with the game's attempt at an art style, and the less I say about Candy, the better. Secondly, the special effects like Shaq's giant kicks or any sort of other special moves lack any sort of flair to feel satisfying, and just look like effects that just got done cropping, and the random slowdown finishers don't look stylish and lack any sort of crunch. I'd ask for more, but that'd screw with the frame rate more. The game can reach 60 frames, and it does at some points, but other times it dips far lower than that, and in Stage 5, the thing just chugs at 20 or lower. I'm not that picky about frame rates, but I at least want the game to be consistent, let alone not look awkward. Combine these with occasional frame rate stutters where the game just outright stops right there, and baffling loading times, and the whole thing just feels dysfunctional. Oh, and I ran into some glitches that impeded my experience further. Had the game get stuck on loading a cutscene, my controller stopped registering left analog inputs during this fight, the boss's attack outright failed to process here, and during this boss, the game soft-locked. Why did I decide to do this? And the weird thing is this game is not that graphically intense, so I don't know what's causing these. I don't know if this is a thing with how my capture card gets involved, or if I got a bad copy of the game, or if it has something to do with how the PS4 version was optimized. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if the last one was the case, since this footage of the Xbox One X version of the game, while still having a lot of my problems with the presentation, isn't really as bad at some of them as the PS4 version. But regardless, my problems are still there and still not acceptable. Going back to the cutscenes used to tell a story, I dislike watching them for two reasons presentation related. For one thing, the way they're animated looks really stiff. When characters move their mouths, they either look way too fish-like or way too puppet-like, making them really awkward to watch. And their mouths are almost always completely still, and they stay that way unless they're actually talking, or on a fewer occasions, moving their eyes. As a result, they always look almost dead inside. And for the second thing,
you kept tagging yourself on Instagram. Was like a trail of cyber breadcrumbs.
I'm surprised that the voice actors they got for this didn't have any red flags raised when they heard these performances, because wow! Everyone either reads their lines with either the enthusiasm of sandpaper or with the mindset like they wanted to get their recordings over with as soon as possible. Okay, Shaq, buddy, I've got nothing against you, but real talk, what direction were you giving here? Nothing about his performance really fluctuates, as his more comedy-focused lines and his more drama-focused lines have nearly identical deliveries.
If I wanted money, I would have become a basketball player, demon. My world had been turned upside down. I was lost in a strange land. Confused, so many questions left unanswered. Yay, I need your guidance.
Whoever thought that this was fine clearly needs to go back and study a few things. And as for other performances, characters like Babyface and Arthur sound just as bored, Diamond and Candy sound like their lines were made from some kind of text-to-speech generator, and yay!
Shaq here, time will soon arrive when your strength will be needed.
If any people of Chinese descent got offended by that, I would not be surprised. So, the presentation may not be 100% wrong, but the things that are wrong end up harming the game even further, and I question how some of these things were overlooked to begin with. Even for a small budget title, these are very amateurish mistakes. Now we move on to the most important part of a beat-em-up, that being that the full health restoration is a product placement, and also the gameplay. And I won't beat around the bush, the game's controls aren't that great. I mean, they respond fine most of the time, but they also don't feel very fluid. The ground movement feels sluggish, especially when Shaq is carrying something, his jump feels awkward at best, and the dodge rolling is incredibly unorthodox. Deciding to channel a little God of War within them, the dodge roll is mapped to the right analog stick, since having camera control for a side-scrolling beat-em-up would be pointless. But my problem is that while doing this, you're not invincible, meaning horizontal attacks can still hit you. There's almost no fluidity between it and the combat, and you cannot roll horizontally. The only time I really used the dodge roll was for one or two boss fights, but aside from them, I forgot this maneuver even existed and just stuck with normal combat, which, by the way, let's talk about that. I mean, it functions fine, I guess, but like the rolling, it does not feel smooth. There's incentive to get a combo going to make the kicks you can do with the circle button stronger, but honestly, aside from using the roundhouse kick to knock some enemies out of bounds, and some other enemies that require you use the kick, like these shield sumo guys, I didn't find much use out of using this, since they really didn't feel that much stronger than the basic combo you have with the square button. Granted, you do have a charge that can help with some other enemies, and a shockwave attack that's nice for crowd clearing, and I am fine with these since they are balanced out by having cooldown times, leading to some potential strategy with them. But they do so little to shake up the gameplay since no matter what the stage, they throw a crap ton of the same enemies at you. Okay, that might be a slight exaggeration since sometimes they're all small changes that make some move class slightly different, but that's all they are. Small. And yes, there are truly enemies that feel like copy-pastes of one another, which gets very noticeable when the idea of level design is this, and straight shots of nothing else. Yes, I know it's a beat'em up made to be reminiscent of older ones, but come on! There is a line for how much of this one can take before getting really bored. And later on they try to justify this flaw by making fun of it, but it comes off as lazy writing that validates my problem, and thus makes the game feel longer than it really is, but I'll get back to that in a bit. Another thing I don't like about these enemy encounters is the implementation of weapons. On paper that sounds neat, but they food it up. All weapons in this game behave exactly the same way and have no combo game. They just do one attack that either severely damages or outright one-shots everything. While it may seem like there is a bit of strategy to using weapons, as yes, they have a certain amount of durability before breaking, it means nothing if every single weapon, even some of the more fragile ones, can mow through enemy waves with ease, especially if one foe has another weapon that you can just grab and repeat the process with, or if said weapon respawns the moment it breaks. So even if tougher enemies get involved, any strategy that could be had with weapons is rendered moot, which in turn means...
Brilliant game design!
And if you thought the weapons were brainless, wait till you see the power-ups! Yeah, at some points of the game, Shaq can acquire power-ups, which essentially puts the game on autopilot. They spam enemies at you non-stop, but most of the time, actually taking damage in these segments, let alone dying in them, is harder to do than doing one of Crash 1's bridge levels without losing a life. Shaq Diesel does have the risk of paralyzing you for a second if you go overboard with its basic punching, but not only is killing stuff by doing its basic punch a cakewalk since it racks up damage quick, and you can move and punch at the same time, but the way to prevent it from overheating is by doing its shockwave attack, which is massive and hits like a truck. You'll get more than enough opportunities to wipe out legions of foes before they know what hit them, but unlike army clearing hack and slashes, there's so little variance to how Shaq Diesel functions, and it can get boring really quickly. Shaq has it even worse. It doesn't have an overheat meter to worry about, and its basic punches shoot out needles, which can hit just as hard as Shaq Diesel's punches. And I think that speaks for itself given what I criticized Shaq Diesel for. Doesn't help that they aren't used for anything other than more of what you're already doing, and the game just puts you in them and takes you out of them at specific points. It's not like Dry Forms in Kingdom Hearts where you can transform into them when you want at the cost of something. The game gives you them at the same points and takes them away also at the same points. So any sort of variety they could add to the game just instantly disappears in a game that has little to no variety, period. And that lack of variation extends to the bosses, which barely go beyond just hitting the target until they die with little to set them apart from each other. And they don't do a great job at supplying a good test to see what you've learned at the game. A good number of them are even shameless enough to summon hordes of minions to fight alongside them. In fact, the only boss in the game I felt the tiniest smidge of deviation was Babyface. I mean, the fight's not very good, par for the course, but the dance phase part actually added a little bit of something to how the fight played out, even if it was a game of Simon Says, and I will admit, it was kinda funny. But that's just one small light in an already lackluster variety of bosses to add on to lazily designed gameplay, where they try every lazy design choice to mask the game's length. And here's where I go more into that. With all the lazy design decisions and lazy writing to go along with them, I honestly felt like the game was sucking more time out of me than it really was. In fact, I compiled all 4 of the footage videos I got, which contained my entire first playthrough of the game, as well as a lot of the long loading times, the cutscenes, the glitch runs, the few times where I died, and a snippet of menu navigation. And with these total links in my footage videos, my first playthrough lasted 2 hours and 57 minutes. And 1 second. Did this not raise a red flag for any one of the devs? Okay, I'm not that much of a stickler for game length. I do like Sonic Forces after all. But when a game somehow feels like a slog because of how generic, uninspired, mediocre, and just plain unenjoyable the whole thing is, and still manage to be shorter than Avengers Endgame, that's a big problem. Heck, if I only wanted to include the successful gameplay in the footage, I probably would have gotten less than 2 hours of visuals of me playing the game. And that's what it does. The gameplay was handled with so little care that it makes the game slow in all the wrong ways, and fast in all the wrong ways as well. I knew Shaq Fu Legend Reborn was bad going into it, as the bet I made may have told you, but I also wonder if there was anything in this game worth enjoying or worth riffing for enjoyment. But no, I really couldn't find anything to enjoy. To be fair, it'd be stupid to call this game a stain upon gaming, as from what I've seen, there are games that are far worse than this one could ever be, even from the same year, but that still doesn't give it any sort of merit. With the shallow combat, lazy enemy design, insulting aspects about the presentation, technical problems, dull boss fights, uninteresting soundtrack, and overall lack of an impact makes the game not worth it. Every single system Shaq Fu Legend Reborn is on has far better alternatives that can really give you your beat 'em up fixings. Even mobile devices have better options. And if you're a fan of Shaq, I still would not recommend this game, as it showcases so little of what makes him so likable. don't even buy this game as a joke, since in the best case scenario, you might laugh about it for 5 to 10 minutes before getting bored and realizing you just wasted your hard-earned money. Yes, the game doesn't cost a lot of money, but if you ask me, the game doesn't deserve to go for prices in the double digits and doesn't deserve your money at all. I'm sure Shaq will continue to be as fun stuff in other things, but this is definitely not going to be looked back on very fondly. I'm the Lightning Ripper, and... Hello? Pardon? There was DLC released for the game? Well, the game's out of my system memory now. I might as well look it up on YouTube to see what I was missing out on.
It's just the same thing only with guns.
I'm back and about to storm. Shaq Fu, a legend reborn.